5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to Resolutions for Recovery. This show is dedicated to the empowerment and education for all people struggling and suffering with substance use disorder, and that includes especially their families. It is a family disease. It is not a moral failing. It is not any of those things. We want to eliminate the shame and stigma of this insidious disease, and we have quite the epidemic going on Long Island certainly, and across the country. But tonight we're going to focus on what is really good that's happening in the field right now. And my special guest is Steve Chasman. How are you, Steve?
I'm well, Linda. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, always. You're the best.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So before I forget, Sunday, Peter Schweisgood breakfast.
That's right.
It is sold out to capacity, so I can't even tell anybody to come on down. But if they want to see me for raffles, they could do that because I have to beat my good friend Terry Kroll at selling them.
That's right.
So, but that's a fundraiser, right?
It's a fundraiser. It's really to honor the memory of a great man. Father Peter Schweisgood, even though LICAT is a non-denominational program and has been for 61 years, Father Peter was a former executive director, and I'm not breaking his anonymity. He was very open about being a recovering alcoholic. And he passed away 29 years ago, but this is a man who I never had the pleasure of meeting, but there's hardly a place I don't go on Long Island or beyond where I hear Father Peter's good name and how many people and families he helped over many, many decades. And this is a breakfast we started 29 years ago in his honor. But last year when we had our 60th anniversary of the agency, 1956.
Last year was
But we
amazing.
brought it back to a recovery breakfast.
Yes.
And I think the people have spoken, yourself included.
Absolutely.
That we brought in some recovery speakers, and it was really an opportunity for all of us by county to come together, break a little bread, as it were,
Yes.
and really talk about, as you said, the experience, strength, and hope, and that recovery is possible.
And how empowering was it at the end when you did the countdown for years in recovery?
That's right.
And that young man had, what, 3 hours?
He had a couple of days and said
Yeah.
he was just revived with naloxone from an overdose and was
Yeah.
currently in treatment.
And how everyone embraced him and lifted him up.
And that was impromptu, Linda, as you
Yeah,
know. I mean,
I know.
that's the kind of stuff that happens with recovery, is that there's no coincidences. And of course, it's for families too who are in recovery,
Yeah.
respectfully to families who have lost members, that they can find some comfort in community. And of course, they're part of the larger community.
Yeah,
But
unfortunately. no.
Unfortunately. But we're glad that it's a luxury problem to have, that we're sold out.
I know, it's awesome.
I think it's time, and you and I have talked about this, to really focus on the hope.
Yes.
And also, it's a time also maybe to change some of our dialogue, which is, if you're going to put 2,000 people in a park in March, if you're going to put 500 people in a hotel room, like, what are we going to do with that?
Yeah.
How could that be converted into a really powerful platform that it is? And obviously, you've been a leader in the field, just speaking from your experience, strength, and hope. And I've seen you work in official offices from Albany and both counties. But really, you know, in light of what's gone on in the last couple of weeks, I'm not going to allude to the Washington Post story or 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
But, you know, it just may be that there are darker forces at work here. And really, it's going to come down to people like you and I.
You know, and we can, I hate to focus on, I like to stay in my community because I know what I can change. So the mom or dad or person struggling that calls me today, that I can direct to people that can really help them and hold their hands through their, you know, experience.
Absolutely.
Or go stay in my state and work in Albany and work in the counties. But when you really start to bring in all the evil forces that are at work here, it is much bigger than any of us can even imagine. I personally think. I don't think we've seen the tip of the iceberg with dependent babies and, you know, grandparents raising babies that are now orphans because their parents are deceased. But we can't worry about what we can't worry about. But we can focus on the good stuff that is, you know, the driving forces that are trying to overtake the bad.
Right.
You know, we're still a little unbalanced in the scale, but let's focus on
Absolutely.
positive.
And listen, for those people who are in recovery, there's 22 million Americans
Yes.
in long-term recovery. The first word or the first step in those shades is we. So for starters, and we've had some tremendous achievements over the last years.
Yes, we
and
have.
It really wasn't led by professionals as it was led by people like yourself who have really converted their own experience into change laws, into advocacy, into being a powerful example where other people can be drawn to. And of course, you can do the warm handoff into appropriate
Absolutely.
treatment.
Appropriate treatment.
And treatment on demand. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, with any crisis, there are crisis profiteers and people who kind of, spur up like mushrooms in
Yeah.
the dark and try to make a quick buck on people's despair. But I think we've circled the wagon, so to speak, here on Long Island.
I
and
hope so.
We've put the call out that, listen, we're very rich in Lycad 61 years. I think a Seafield who's, 40 or 50, and these aren't public service announcements, but we are very rich in resources of agencies and organizations who have been here for many decades and have been very successful.
And New York State Department of OASIS, Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse, there are programs all over the state. So you don't need to go to Florida or Arizona or California. You can be up in Lake Placid, which is 6-7 hours away from here, and be basically in a whole different country because it's a whole different country than here.
That's right.
So you can remove yourself from your location and still be in a great New York State facility that is licensed and, reviewed by OASIS. And New York State has treatment for those that cannot afford. You don't have to do insurance fraud to get, Medicaid in another state or anything like that. There is treatment available in New York State for everyone that's looking for it.
And that's been one of Lycad's purposes for 61 years. We're not a treatment facility per se. We do counseling, but we do screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. And in fact, I don't mind saying that we just launched kind of a Lycad app. It's called Suffolk Light. So you could
that's
go to
awesome.
your kind of app store and Suffolk Light, which stands for the Long Island Guide to Health and Treatment. And Lycad, FCA, Thrive. And we also have, the reason I bring it up is not so much for Lycad, is there's an OASIS locator there. So it's a real-time locator where you could go through your device, and if you need at 4 in the morning or 4 in the afternoon, an open bed, it could tell you across New York State where there are availabilities.
So there's no reason, unfortunately, people and I'll speak from my experience, when you're in the midst of that and your loved one is struggling, especially a child, you're frozen. So it's you try to figure it out. And unfortunately, we need to get all of the things that we do have available out to every, certainly Long Islander.
And listen, just because you have a glossy webpage doesn't mean those are reputable sources.
Correct.
The internet in the digital age is a great resource, but sometimes there's so many resources, it's really tough to pick the pepper out of the fly caca and say, which are the reputable, evidence-based, best practice OASIS licensed facilities, and who are the ones that have a really cool interactive webpage, but the treatment really isn't all that effective, and that's difficult to do. So organizations like yours, like ours, we're here for that.
Tell everybody why it's so important to have an OASIS credentialed facility.
Well, the Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services in New York State gives a license that they are using what's called best or evidence-based practices that have been proven effective to be treatment modalities that work for substance use disorder and or co-occurring disorders.
Okay.
Are
they reviewed? Are they audited?
Of course,
and
they're
reviewed?
audited, they're licensed. Lycad is, in fact, OASIS certified for education and training.
Okay.
So we've been OASIS certified for many, many decades, being 61 years old, but we're not treatment. So there are special licenses for treatment, and every state has its own licensure. Now, some states are a little more lenient on licensing, but only recently have we really seen what the evidence-based practice is. We've been hurling tens of billions of dollars for half a century at substance use, and even though self-help is really important, we know more about the disease of addiction than ever
Yeah.
before. And we know that it's a neurological disease, it's a psychological disease, it's a social disease, and it's a spiritual disease. Therefore, addiction medicine, addiction treatment, and treatment modalities have really come quantum leaps, not only in the last 50 or 80 years, but most specifically in the last 15 or 20.
Yeah, well, they have a whole new ball game coming at us, right now. So I think everybody has to pull all the stops out.
And we're studying, different modalities and different etiologies, and that's a word that means cause. I mean, really, that's the billion-dollar question. I had a federal congressman ask me recently, who we all know well and who cares very much, saying, why Long Island? Well, you have to look at the data. It's overwhelmingly Caucasian. It's overwhelmingly middle and upper middle class. It's predominantly male. And, that's kind of the demographic we have here.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But really,
interesting.
the trillion-dollar question is, why are more Long Islanders, why are more New Yorkers and Americans trying to anesthetize themselves at a rate we've never before seen?
That's the million-dollar question that and especially since the age of onset is now, 11?
Yeah.
That really just breaks my heart. Because what are we doing to our 11-year-olds that they want to escape the world? And that they even know that that's how to escape the world.
And by the late teens and early 20s, that they can become fully immersed in the muddy end of the playing field, which is the most powerful narcotics on the face of the planet, from heroin to fentanyl to prescription opiates. I mean, that is straight up self-medication. That is the numbing of the highest order. And we haven't seen trends like that in substance use ever before. This isn't the first opiate crisis we had.
No.
But we saw people get there in their late 20s and 30s, and it was after a drug use continuum that started in their teens through alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, and, they're still going from those three gateway drugs at 11, 12, 13, 14,
Yes.
but they're going
nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. I like to review that for people,
please.
because anyone that says those aren't gateway drugs really needs to educate themselves.
Well, I've said this to you before. Of the 1,000 people we see a month in Nassau and Suffolk, not some, not most, but every single one of them started with marijuana and alcohol. And, we talk about the 64,000 Americans in 2016 that died of opiate overdose. What we don't talk enough about, and I know you and I do, is the 88,000 Americans that died from alcohol-related.
Yeah.
And alcohol is by far America's most devastating drug.
Absolutely.
People ask me
But
all
it's
the-
legal. Isn't
But
that
it's legal.
amazing?
But it's legal. And a lot of these prescription medications are as well.
Well, they're legal in a sense, I guess, but you
In a
still
sense.
have, in a sense.
But, when we see young people today, it is not uncommon for them to come in and have a host of different prescription medications after seeing 4 or 5 psychiatrists for anxiety, for ADD, for sleep disorder, for reactive or mild depression. 30 years ago, a healthcare professional like myself would never, not that I'm a prescriber as a clinical social worker, but we didn't see adolescents on psychotropic medication or mood stabilizers because neurologically the brain is not yet developed. So to do a pharmaceutical or chemical intervention in the neurochemistry of an organ that is not fully developed was...
It's a little maddening.
Well, it was few and far between. And that's not to say that there are legitimate psychiatric conditions
absolutely.
that afflict younger people.
Yes.
And there are medications today that were not around 30 years ago. And the way we treat different co-occurring disorders or psychiatric disturbances have come a long way. But I think, and we've seen this too true in the last couple of weeks with the story, that we've overshot the mark with how we prescribe, at the rate we prescribe, and to what age groupings we're really marketing some of these prescriptions to.
Yeah. For me, being a mom and having had 3 kids, not every child has ADHD. Kids need more art and gym and other activities to really, captivate their attention span. Little kids are not supposed to sit still for an extended period of time, whether they're in school or not in school. They need recess.
Neither are 47-year-old social workers, Linda. Oh, I'm sorry. Could we just keep moving?
I know, right?
But I think most of us, particularly at the height of a digital and technological age, are walking around with some level of attention deficiencies.
Absolutely.
But you touched on, with art and music, about coping skills. And, here we are, particularly you and I, 6-10 years into this, screaming about healthy coping skills and prevention programs in school, and we still have not seen a full integration of education and prevention skills, which is beyond the drug talk. It's promoting healthy coping skills, wellness plans, healthy communication skills, socialization.
Family health policy that you all talk about, and keeping your family well.
That's right.
I worked with your girl Risa Berg the other night at her
at North Shore.
school, and the superintendent, who I was very happy to see there of schools, and he said, what would be the one most thing that you would love to see us do this year? And that's what I told him: prevention. Prevention in kindergarten. Because if we don't start changing the way that children come through with their parents, 10 years from now, where are we going to be standing?
And it's not a luxury item. I mean,
No.
with the world moving at a rate we've never before clocked with digital and technological devices.
Absolutely.
If we don't, and here's the metaphor, if we don't find time to power down, there's
Yeah.
going to be a crash or a freeze.
Yeah.
That's the digital metaphors. But
That
the
was
crash,
a very good one,
It's
Steve.
not my own. You won't hear an original idea here. I steal it all, Linda. But the crash we're seeing in the form of depression, in adolescent suicide, in attention deficit disorder, in self-medications, and with
Yeah.
substances and gambling and sex and internet spending, process addictions through technology and devices like gaming. So young people and adults, quite frankly, are really moving at a rate we've never before moved. And if we don't power down with mindfulness or being able to slow the mind down without pills or powders or potions, there's going to be a cost. And
Yeah.
that cost could be your physical and mental health.
Young families need to just disconnect and reconnect. I always have a docking station. Plug all your technology in when you're eating dinner or watching a family show afterwards. Whatever that time is, even if it's an hour, everyone should be off and speak to one another. We've lost that skill.
And, there are several homegrown neuroscientists and physicians, from Dr. Dewey to Dr. Nick Carderas, who wrote
Yes.
a book called Glow Kids. And Dr. Dewey, of course, doing PET scans. And we know that certain devices and the way it lights up is having the same effect as some dopamine rushes that we get
Yes.
from certain mind and mood altering substances. So when we hear our phone ring, that it's actually almost Pavlovian, like ringing
Yes.
the bell and we have to check. So once you get into that kind of conditioning, and of course drugs play a role in that.
Yes.
Let me get high and play video games. Let me get high and communicate with people from all over the world. Let me get high and sexually act out online. So, drugs have always served as, I'm not going to say the word aphrodisiac, but as a stimulant
But it
for
does.
unhealthy behavior.
Yeah, for unhealthy behavior.
For unhealthy behavior. So, all this has to be looked at. It needs to be studied. And, I think we're trying to just do some patchwork and just stop people from getting sick when we're really not looking at what are some of our best approaches through prevention and education, through really instilling healthy coping skills at a very young age.
Very
and that
young age,
includes
yes.
exercise. And listen, I'm not qualified, but we have other epidemics in this country, like adolescent obesity and
Absolutely.
childhood diabetes.
Yes.
For a lack of exercise. So I think, we have some changes to do. And you and I'm not judging our age, but I mean, we're old enough to remember Columbine as an isolated, tragic incident. And now it seems like a weekly event.
Yeah.
So it's not to say the world's a dark, miserable place. It's not. It's beautiful and bright.
Yes.
But you have to work on perspectives. And I think that comes with training or counseling, or at least some kind of coping skill or prevention strategy that we could be introducing to children when they're very young.
And they're very young. It's just also a simple fact of let them figure it out sometimes. It's okay not to feel okay. You need to be you need to be comfortable in your uncomfortableness.
Otherwise, you deny yourself the opportunity of problem solving, critical thinking, and being at least okay, and acceptance doesn't mean approval, to accept that sometimes life deals you some uncomfortable situations.
Absolutely. Life is going to deal you. So, in yoga, you never get attached
Breathe
to the
into it.
most happy moment or the most sad moment. Just be in the
middle path.
moment that you are. That's all.
And to be able to breathe into it and live
Yes.
with it. And people in sobriety speak of this till the nth degree, that, just because you get sober, it doesn't mean that you're going to be with peaches and cream. What sobriety guarantees you is that if you don't want to, you don't have to drink a drug over it. That every problem has a solution. And sometimes that solution is, I accept that this is going on, and this is, I mean, the tail wagging the dog. I mean, I know you've practiced acceptance of things that are grossly unacceptable, I'm
Yes.
sure, for a mother and for a family, but
You know, and I've learned to really sit in that moment, because you lose a child, you don't get over that. You will grieve for the rest of your life. But when that happens, I have to be in the place that I am and acknowledge it. There's no skirting around it. There's no, I can't do this right now, or tomorrow, or the next day. No, just be uncomfortable. That's what you have to do. And you know what? It comes at a time when I'm supposed to be quiet. It always just seems to work out that way. Yeah. But you know, our kids, parents need to stop fixing all their problems, allow them to have some consequences within reason, you know. But I know this, that when I came home from kindergarten, my mother didn't, you know, if I had a tummy ache because something happened, she didn't call and say that Linda needs Xanax. She found a way to have me open up and say what the problem was, and to say, how do you think we can make this better for tomorrow?
I think some of those models have been challenged, and I'm with you on that. But you can have 1,000 friends on Facebook and no one to talk to. We also have to understand that in between happiness and misery, there's probably like 100 different stages.
Oh yeah.
That things aren't all great or miserable. That being okay is okay. Being not so okay sometimes is just a passing feeling, or you could work out of it. I think young people today think that the emotional spectrum is a lot shorter than it is.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of different levels. And, you know, the dialectical behavioral model, Marsha Linehan's model, is all about that. She's like, we've been asking people through DBT, to, you know, psychology, to tell us how they feel. Then it occurs to me that maybe people don't know how they feel. That between the neck up and between our ears, there's a lot of emotions that really transpire on any given moment, on any given day, on a conscious, subconscious, or unconscious level. So maybe we should teach them what emotions are. And that's what that model teaches. Like, you know, it's not just happiness and sadness, that sometimes there's a lot of different planes in between. And it helps with communication skills.
Absolutely.
Now, you shouldn't throw your business out to every Tom, Dick, and Jane, because you can get hurt on social media. But a trusted friend, a clergy, a teacher.
Unfortunately, these kids have so much, you know, with Snapchat, with everything right now, that they think Snapchat goes away. Somebody just has to take a screenshot of whatever stupid thing they did. And why is it so important that they spend every waking second posting on social media? That's just a phenomenon that I think has to be looked at anyway.
And if you look at some of the treatment modalities that are most effective, and you could take self-help included, which is, in my own opinion, statistically, I've heard, and it's difficult to support, that for 82 years, the concept of one substance user helping another is unparalleled. You come in asking for help with powerlessness and unmanageability, and by the 12th step, you're actually going out and helping others. Not so much for their benefit, but also equally for yours, because the way you build self-esteem is doing esteemable acts. And if you look at all the major religions, and I'm not qualified, or all the major spiritualists throughout the world history, they all have one thing in common. If you want to be miserable, think of yourself. If you want to be happy, you have to think of others.
Yes.
And there is truly great reward in not being glued to your device and concerned with the I, me, or my, but more concerned with, how could I go out and help others and use technology to actually be of service to
Absolutely.
Because therefore you get the benefit, they get the benefit, and there's a certain self-esteem that gets built.
But we're also going back to talking about community and actually speaking to one another and calling somebody and say, how are you doing today?
That's right.
You know, I'm sorry that you're having a bad day. Is there anything I can do to help, you know?
And here we are on Long Island. I mean, Levittown, the first suburban community, right? In the 1940s and 50s. This whole thing of intentional community is a bunch of malarkey. You really got to need each other. And I think with all of our devices, not that technology's bad. It's like any new invention. How are we going to use it? And to what purpose is it going to serve us? The fact that we could communicate with people all over the world, you know, that's fascinating. That's a miracle. And it's incredible, but how are we using it for ill effect, or are we really using it to pull ourselves together in more of a global world? And let's tie it back to addiction. Whether you live in Kathmandu, or whether you live in Mumbai, or whether you live in Northport, Long Island, the signs and symptoms and the behaviors associated with addiction are virtually the same.
Yes.
No matter what culture you grow up, this is why it's a disease. So being able to use technology maybe as a platform to really get not only those 22 million Americans living in long-term sobriety, forget Americans. How about that? Maybe hundreds of millions of people that are living in long-term sobriety from across the world to have a
Yes.
collective voice that we all need to do something about.
Absolutely.
And save a life.
In New Jersey today, they just launched something with a text code for the state that if you see something or you know of someone that's in trouble, that you could text
That's great.
their information, just to start to cut down on overdose or to get that brief intervention in there.
Well, I've been stealing the MTA's tagline for years, and no one's called me on it. But if you see something, say something.
Absolutely.
And we can't wait for the old school mentality of wait till the user comes to you, because with the presence of heroin and fentanyl and other prescription drugs and a very potent form of marijuana and alcohol, they're not getting the opportunity. So
No,
instead
they're
of
not.
waiting for them to come to us, it's our responsibility as a field, through technology, through any means necessary, to really get to them, because people's
You have
lives.
to be the roadblock. You have to throw the roadblock in at every and any given chance that you get.
And we've changed our message in schools. It's not ratting on people. We're
No.
trying to save lives, and we're trying to recruit you.
Yes.
We need your help. People who use drugs, not bad people. But it's possible they're very sick people. And if your friend was sick with any kind of disorder, including
Absolutely.
the flu, you would call somebody, an adult, to help out.
Yes.
And we know also from peer-to-peer data that they'd rather hear from someone their own age or age appropriate than someone like me, or perhaps even someone like you.
Oh, without a doubt.
So we gotta train more peer-to-peer stuff.
Well, Kim Lauby does such
Yeah.
great work with building student leaders out on Shelter Island, with her program. She really
Sure
does.
She sure does.
And that's what we really need to spend time and effort and dollars on,
Right.
especially here.
And I'm sure they go on, but maybe think tanks are about time that we can put some minds in a room and really figure out what's needed. More importantly, ask adolescents what would be the most effective way.
That's the most
to
effective
outreach.
way. Next week we're going to have Northport. I know you're from Northport, East Northport. Their youth council come on, and let them develop what they need, because they know what they need and they know how to reach their age group. Then let the adults come in and maybe tweak it a little bit, to make it feasible. But we don't need to think for them. They're brilliant kids. They really are brilliant kids.
And they know what's effective for them and how they can
They
be
do,
reached.
and they know how to reach each other.
Is there
So
anything
let
really
them.
anything really worse than a bunch of academics sitting in a room deciding what's best for adolescents? And the thing about academics is sometimes they can, they think they know everything but have no idea what's going on.
Absolutely.
So we have to do the needs
Absolutely.
assessment. Have to do the needs assessment.
We're going to go to a commercial in a second. I hear the music. So when we come back, we are going to talk about some great pilot programs that are coming out on Long Island, and really where can you go if you're in early sobriety. Of course, there's Thrive. You have to plug Thrive at every given chance.
Absolutely.
And we'll be right back after this message.
My age is 18 years old, and my name is Evan.
My name is Sean, and I'm 19 years old.
My name is Justin, I'm 16.
My name is Angelica. I'm 18 years old.
Marijuana, and I was 13 years old.
Marijuana, and my age was 13.
The first drug I ever tried was marijuana, and I was 12 years old.
It was marijuana, and I was 11 years old.
Yes, and that escalated to promethazine, lean.
I began to take pills like Xanax, Percocets.
I began using other substances such as pills and alcohol.
I then went on to cocaine and pills and quickly progressed to heroin. I was 13 years old when I first started using heroin. I had aspirations of going to an Ivy League school, and that quickly, within a year or two, changed. I stopped going to my classes. I stopped going to school altogether eventually. All my friends were kind of just dropping me.
I started getting in trouble in school, eventually kicked out. I got in trouble with the law a lot.
I wasn't really hanging out with a lot of sober people, just people that use. I overdosed at 15. I've been at Outreach for 5 months. Outreach honestly really helps you. It shows that you're honestly worth something. And it's possible to become sober if you put in progress. But it's not just gonna be handed to you, you really have to wanna change. Inpatient, you can't just leave. You stay here and you have to deal with it. That's what I feel like a lot of kids need.
In a long-term facility, the counselors get to know the resident better, and they get to actually work with them more than in a short-term 28-day facility. And it really gives kids a chance to work on themselves rather than being rushed through a program just to be thrown back into life, going back into the same old bad habits that they were doing before.
Coming in here, I couldn't believe how long I would have to be here, but after a couple months, like, you know, talking to counselors, I kind of came to the realization that, like, I need a lot of time and work to repair everything I've done.
The things that we get taught here, you know, it really does help you in life, and it gives you a different perspective. It's very important for a kid to have a family involvement in treatment so they don't think they're alone in this. We communicate on a better basis than how we used to. We understand each other more, and that was from the help of Outreach.
They come every Wednesday night for support group. They come to a group every other week.
They come to peer support group to discuss their problems also. My relationship honestly has got a lot better. Because I remember my mom used to never want to say anything to me because she would be scared of my reaction. I'm starting to realize in here, like, I really have to take advantage of the fact that I have her still.
When I was about 14 is when my parents realized that I had several different problems, such as behavioral issues, and the behavioral issues kind of stemmed from my drug use. I began caring less about myself and others. Outreach has really made me realize how important family is. If I was out of state in a program where my parents were not involved, I would have never been able to strengthen my relationship with them. My father told me that I've inspired him to make changes in his life, and that meant a lot to me. I've never heard my dad be inspired by something before, and I was just proud that it was me.
Welcome back to Resolutions for Recovery. And Steve and I are going to pick up our conversation.
Sure.
So we know really all the problems that are wrong, and we can circle around the problems that are wrong forever, really, quite honestly. However, let's talk about some really good stuff that's going on.
Well, I think you and I and others, solution focused. Every problem
Yes.
has a solution.
Absolutely.
One program we're really excited about, and I hope we're not speaking too prematurely, there'll be a press conference on Monday. We'll certainly do an announcement on Sunday, and it's been announced in smaller venues, but we're really excited that Police Commissioner Tim Sini
He's a rock star, too.
has really created a seismic shift on how America itself has dealt with the drug crisis for more than half a
Yes.
century. It's been one-dimensional. Incarcerate, incarcerate, incarcerate. Meanwhile, the jails are filled across
Yes.
the country. We incarcerate almost less than 3 million people in this country. We incarcerate more people in this country than any other country on earth. And that includes some of places we love to point fingers and say, you know, your human rights violation.
Yes.
Almost 3 million people in this country are incarcerated. The majority of them are untreated substance users.
Yes.
And I don't know them, so I'm not here to tell you they're good or bad, but I believe most people are inherently good. And substance users left untreated make a host of unhealthy decisions that have really bad outcomes.
Well, they have to feed what they have to
That's right.
feed.
That's right.
Period.
And if nothing else, possession. So if you peel the onion around substance use, forget about possession and driving under the influence, but what people do in the obsession and compulsion of a substance use disorder to get their drug of choice. If you think of breaking and entering, if you think of robbery, if you think of home invasion, if you think of petty larceny, if you think of grand larceny, I mean, let alone domestic violence and stuff
Yeah.
that gets exacerbated by alcohol and or other drug use, not that we condone this. Everyone's responsible. But Police Commissioner Sini and LICAT have put together an opportunity to do what's called Pivot. It is preventing incarceration via opportunities for treatment. So let me say that again, Joe, so I can get you. Pivot, preventing incarceration via opportunities to treatment. And it's based
That's
on
awesome.
it's based on a Long Island version of what was called on a national level LEAD, which was law enforcement assisted diversion. So an agency like LICAT, who's been doing family interventions for 61 years, we've been doing screening brief interventions for 61 years. And what are we intervening on? The drug use continuum, where it goes from experimental drug use to misuse to abuse and dependence. We're intervening in that progression. And as we say in the field, left untreated, jails, institutions,
Or
and
death.
for more than 64,000 Americans last year, death. So
Yeah.
this pivot program in partnership with Suffolk County Police is actually an opportunity to do a law enforcement intervention. So before they end up in handcuffs in Suffolk County's finest, you actually have a police commissioner and men and women in law enforcement
Yeah.
who are doing a great job in getting
They are
drugs
doing a
off the
great
street.
job.
But they are willing to take a look at some of the suspects that are on low-level intel for the police department and say this individual is likely engaging in this behavior because of their substance use. Now, they're going to make that choice because it's not our job to
No,
do
it's
police.
not. Correct.
We're not police workers.
And we both know Tim well enough
Yeah.
that, and he said, if they belong in jail, that's where they're going.
That's right. That's
know.
right. And that's a tough job. So
Yeah.
I commend Commissioner Cini. I commend the Suffolk County Police Department for acknowledging that, you know what, some people probably don't belong in handcuffs, and let's try and figure out or vet out
Yeah.
who are the sick ones and who are the people who are really contributing to the detriment of society. Not an easy job. But this is the first time in Long Island history where you have law enforcement partnering with a community-based organization for substance use in the interest of getting people to treatment so they don't have to end up in the brand new facility in Yaphank
But
or Riverhead.
What does it cost every year to institutionalize someone or incarcerate someone? It's got to be $65,000.
Absolutely. I mean, financially, this makes sense, but I almost see that as tertiary, as primary. First off, you incarcerate someone, that individual's not only doing time, their family's doing time too.
Yes, absolutely.
And we know, even though Sheriff DeMarco and certain state prisons have tried, there really isn't a full integration
Correct.
of drug treatment. You're basically sitting in an 8x12 cell until you're doing your time. And some of the activities are voluntary, and listen, jail can be a very stressful place, let alone state prison or penitentiary. So this is a seismic shift on a very small, a local level, where you have a county police commissioner that's willing to change the paradigm of how we deal with substance users, even though they're beyond the law, which makes them eligible for arrest. They're breaking
Yes,
the law.
absolutely.
The fact that we're looking at this differently, for an opportunity to get to treatment, is really a seismic shift on how we.
How will the program work?
Well, when there's low-level intel, we have a point person in the Suffolk County Police Department. Please let your viewers know, or I guess I could say it, LICAT is not working with the police. We are not
Right.
sharing information with the police. The police are sharing some low-level information with us, and we are doing outreach and engagement and saying, now, we run a program of honesty. We never lie to our clients or patients. If they ask where you got your number, from the Suffolk County Police.
Absolutely.
But here, we are not the police. We are healthcare professionals and mental health professionals that want to help you get to detox, inpatient, or outpatient, or counseling before you end up in silver bracelets. That's a nice deal. Now, we run groups in Riverhead and Yaphank. There are really good men and women who are currently incarcerated in the county jail who would love to have had an opportunity like that.
Yeah.
Because we're coming on the holidays. And not that there's ever a good time to be incarcerated, but it's really hard around the summer times on Long Island when you know everyone's at the beach and barbecuing. And it's really, really hard on the individuals and the families when they're incarcerated for the holidays. And probably every other season in between. So this is an opportunity to really get people to the help they need. And you and I talk about etiology. People oftentimes find themselves beyond the law time and time again unless you treat the core issue, which is the substance use.
Absolutely.
And-
You know, my son once said to me, you know, at least I never got arrested. And I said, that would not have been the worst thing that could happen to you.
And you know that there are mothers and fathers who say him getting arrested and getting incarcerated was the best thing that ever happened to him because at least I know where he is and that he's being monitored 24 hours a day, and God willing, he's not doing drugs inside.
Correct.
So, and we also have to commend Sheriff DeMarco for opening the new addiction wing in the Yaphank
Yes.
facility.
Yes.
So, you know, little by slowly. And,
Yes.
and this is why we know efforts of our community and the recovery community and the advocates are not in vain. the fact that you have a Suffolk County Police Commissioner, that you have a sheriff in a county, that you have
Yes.
county executives and state assembly people and legislators and senators and parents and healthcare professionals and educators and clergy all coming together to say, what more can we do?
Absolutely.
This is how you
Absolutely.
end epidemics. I wish it was a lot quicker, Linda, you know?
You know, everything takes so much time because we have a lot of people really trying to do the right thing, but kind of going off in their own direction. So if we all hold hands instead of, you know, trying to find out, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
And they say time takes time, things I must earn.
Yeah.
But, you know, not to be doom and gloom, but, you know, I'm hyper vigilant as a social worker at the Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, as you are as a mother, also who works with an abundance of families
Yes.
across New York State, that that time is ticking, and it's ticking down on people sometimes. So not that
You know,
your show is my
I-
forum to air my frustrations. but
Well, I think that, you know, I always say it, not one more person should join my club. Not one more parent should lose a child. Not one more wife should lose a husband, a father, or, you know, all of those things. It needs to slow down. How many people we lose? 3 every 2 days on Long Island alone?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And even small victories we had with naloxone. Now with the presence of fentanyl, 2 milligrams isn't even doing it. We had to repackage that, and that's to be expected, that we're going to have to retool some of our strategies.
But we work together.
Yes,
so
we
we
do.
bought the kits.
Fentanyl strips.
Yes, to
And-
test for fentanyl.
LICAD is distributing those to
Yes.
every opiate user and their friends and their parents. And listen, the party line is, if it tests positive for fentanyl, you should disregard it. The secondary conversation that we have is, if you don't disregard it, make sure you have a minimum of 4 milligrams of naloxone on site. Do a test shot so you know how potent it is, and never, never, never use alone.
Yes.
If there's fentanyl present, or heroin, quite frankly. This is good risk reduction counseling. And remember, LICAD, abstinence is not always our final goal. We have to meet people where they're at.
They
And
always have
people
to meet people where
And people
where
come
they're
to
at.
LICAD who are committed to longer term drug use. And you know what? We don't turn them away, because until they get to talk about their family or their adverse childhood experiences or their childhood traumas or their fears or anxiety, they may not give up these drugs of choice.
Correct.
So sometimes we could take the front door's locked, you can go around back. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's more than one way to recovery. So everyone's recovery is individual, and we need to stop putting down MAT, medicine-assisted treatment. They're still in recovery,
Absolutely.
even if they're on something that just helps them get through it. Why do we shun people like that? That's always been kind of a
Well, it's almost like turning your back on
Yeah.
science,
Yeah.
where addiction research, addiction psychopharmaceuticals like medication-assisted therapy, even low-level antidepressants for the first 30, 60, 90 days of early sobriety. You know, it was Newton's laws of physics, wasn't it? Those that go up must come down.
Yes.
And people, when they're used to 500,000 surges of dopamine triggered by opiates, when they come off of that after months or years or decades, there could be a reactive depression. You hear it all the time. Oh, my life is boring. Well, you're used to dopamine surges that only never happen naturally at 500,000 surges.
Yeah.
You know, therefore, you have to maybe get a mood stabilizer to help you get stabilized. Now, I'm not a prescriber, but we know that this has been protocol and practice, and to some success. Now, it doesn't mean you want to put the world on mood stabilizers who are getting off drugs, but for some people, they may just require it because there is a reactive depression in coming off their drug of choice.
And especially when we talk about all these young people, and that includes up to the age of 25 or 30, because these young people, if they've been doing opiates or heroin for 10 years, they're not 25 years old. They might be 15 years old emotionally, right? So
That's right.
we have to meet them where they are. And if that means that they take an MAT, Vivitrol shot, whatever it is that they're on, that gets them to the other side of the road and in recovery, who really cares how you get there?
And I think we have to be very careful about kicking out that medication crutch, either with illicit
Yes.
drugs or with pharmaceuticals, because until we can help them instill healthy coping skills, listen, early sobriety is not fun. Every
Right.
emotion comes out of every orifice because you've been suppressing it or anesthetizing or numbing it for so long. early sobriety is very, very scary.
Yeah.
You're feeling feelings you haven't felt. You're dealing with the shame and
You're
guilt.
feeling.
You're feeling.
Period.
You
Yep.
could just say that. You're absolutely right. But there is the dark spectrum of emotions too, of shame and guilt, of coming awake or having that moment of clarity of what I did to myself, my family, my friends.
You know, that's just as you're saying that, I can think of my son and how much he despised his actions and his thoughts and his words. And it, you know, it made him feel less than always. And
we
what
have
a horrible way to feel.
And we have a relapse prevention group, so we see younger people and older people, quite frankly, who are like, this is how we know it's a disease. I can't believe that I did that to my mother. I can't believe that I did that to my children. I can't believe I did that to myself.
Yeah.
In tears.
Yeah.
I mean, genuine pain for putting themselves and those that love them and around them through the horrors and misery of a substance use disorder.
There's the person struggling with substance use, and there's the person.
And you always
And
very
those-
articulate when you described your son. That
Yes.
towards the end, that was not my son.
No.
That was my son who had been hijacked by heroin. And unfortunately, you know, the people.
And I don't, and I'll say it, I say it out loud, and if he was, you know, if I had the opportunity, when I have the opportunity to see him, I don't miss Thomas, the addict. I don't miss him one single solitary bit. My son, I miss every second of the day. But two distinct people. One was a nasty son of a gun. And we don't, and that's not Thomas the good guy.
Right. But you know, that's part of the reason I think, and you and I have talked extensively about this, as to why substance use is treated so differently than other diseases. Because traditionally, it never plays right with our American values. It's not that
Correct.
people lie, as they're in denial and they have to tell untruths to acquire their means to get their drug of choice. I mean, yeah, it manifests as a lie. They're
Of course.
untruthful, but you know, a lie's a little like a wish, Freud said. That, oh, did you do an 8-ball last night and steal $50? No, because most times not only do they not want the consequence, they don't really want to know that about themselves. And also, you know, people with the ADL, you know, their activities of daily living, sometimes their hygiene gets compromised.
Oh, big time.
Yes, they look a little disheveled, if not frightening. So there are other diseases out there that we're a lot more as a society empathetic about. But because the symptoms of this particular disease, substance use disorder, it really doesn't play well with our, you know, our societal norms. We're expecting like, oh, everyone should behave here. Well, you know what? There's a lot of diseases where people don't behave. And I think substance use disorder maybe is coming out of the shadows and being treated like other psychiatric disturbances, or perhaps even on the broader scale, other diseases like cancer and diabetes. I mean, I use the analogy, and listen, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we've been
Yes.
devastated on Long Island with breast cancer. I have people
Absolutely.
in my life, thank God, who are survivors, and they're proud survivors, and I celebrate Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I wear my pink and the whole thing. You know, and they should march by the hundreds of millions nationally, and the Brooklyn
Absolutely.
Bridge should be pink. But what I would wish for the disease of my work is that maybe those 22 million Americans could possibly come out of church basements, and maybe we could find ourselves on a bridge or at a White House or at a building and all come together
All
and
come
really
together.
celebrate. But you know what? We don't
There
have to
would be
live.
very surprising people there because,
be.
yeah.
But the reason that people don't disclose sometimes about their substance use disorder or that they're in recovery is because they fear how other people are going to view them.
Correct.
Because there's still the misnomer of, unlike cancer,
Right,
drugs you did to yourself.
right.
And we know neurologically there's a point, and it's a gray line where you
Yeah.
cross into misuse, into abuse, into dependence, where you actually lose the choice, where the body becomes physically dependent, when the mind becomes psychologically dependent, and of course all these behaviors are happening despite the individual.
Yep.
You know, to wake up
Absolutely.
every morning and say, I'm not going to use today, and be stoned by noon,
Yeah.
how destructive it is to one's self-esteem and one's self-worth to have to endure that repetitive behavior every day until people, and literally, I know, people get leveled. And
Yeah.
that's when the
They
disease,
give up.
the disease starts to take over
Yeah.
and say, I can't do anything about this. This is my destiny. This is my lot in life. I'm going to die of this disease. But that's where interventionists come in. That's where your show comes in. That's where people in recovery have to go the extra mile to bring people to the treatment, because some people are giving up, and they're giving up at a younger and younger age. The great lie that is addiction.
That's what, you know, when we do family work and we create a strong family unit, that person will seek help, I believe, much more quickly than if we leave the family unit in shambles.
That's right. And codependency and enabling are a phenomenon that happens
Yes.
when you have a sick individual, particularly a child, in the family dynamic.
Yeah.
As they say in self-help, self will run riot. And it runs riot not so much in the streets, it runs riot over the people that are closest and love the user the most.
Absolutely. And they see the disease progressing.
And you can speak to this better than I can, so I won't even attempt because I'm not a parent. But, it really defies every maternal and paternal instinct. When you see a sick child, from birth on up, when they're sick, let me nurture them so they can get better.
Yes.
And it must be a very disempowering feeling to not be able to solve this sickness for a child or for a loved one.
Absolutely. It's devastating. That's why, moms and dads get frozen. Not that they want to be frozen, they're just scared to death. And where do I turn and what do I do? And, and life goes on every single day. Still have to go to work, still have other children to take care of, still have to figure out what's going on, and how do you do that all at the same time?
And the codependency. Listen,
Yeah.
if Johnny or Jane is doing well, everyone happy.
Yeah.
If Johnny or Jane's not doing well, keep in mind they're using mind and mood altering drugs, which takes them on emotional roller coaster based on what they're using, how often, and with what interactions. So the family is truly on the roller coaster too.
Absolutely.
Now, how does that interplay with family dynamics beyond with the user? Relationships get challenged, ideologies get challenged, belief systems get challenged. And it makes for a total destruction, like you said, of the family unit.
Of the family unit. Yes, absolutely.
so-
And siblings, they have those voices that go unheard way too often because mom and dad are so wrapped up. As a parent, you're as happy as your most unhappy child. So, when one's spinning out of control, the other ones that are probably doing well are not given so much attention because they're okay.
And what message
But they're
does
mad.
that? And what message does that
I
send?
might as well be a
Negative attention seeking
Yep.
actually gets all the attention.
Correct.
Like I should be standing on a kitchen table smashing pots and pans, and maybe mom and dad will notice me.
Absolutely.
Or failing out of school.
Failing out of school, or maybe I'll, start drinking with my brother or sister.
Not uncommon.
Not uncommon.
And tragic, but and those are psychodynamics at work.
Yeah.
But that's why intervention's so important, not only with the user, but the
family.
interventions that we've been doing, LICAD for only 60 years, family interventions. We always have said it's equally for the family than the user.
Yes.
Whether the user goes to treatment or not, it's the family's opportunity to work with an interventionist to say, we see what's happening to you, we understand the sickness,
Yes.
and this is what we're willing to do to help you. If you choose not to get the help, then this is what the family has agreed not to provide you with. Now, that doesn't mean withholding love.
No.
But it's up to the family to decide where that boundary is.
Correct.
That whether you're sick or whether you try to get well, this family, amid the illness, is going to do its best to preserve itself. And it doesn't mean we don't love you. We're here to give you what you need, not what you want. And that's a tough dialogue.
That's a tough dialogue.
And
It
for-
is.
and for someone
because
who's
it
been
goes
doing-
against every being in your fiber.
So when I said it
does.
challenges beliefs and ideologies, people have different ideas. And people ask me as a therapist, oh, what do I do? Do I put them out on the... it's never for me to tell a family member what to... Or any therapist. It's like marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Never tell someone to leave their husband or wife because they'll resent you for it. But what I will help you do is process what is the best approach for your family. But I would never tell a mother to put their son or daughter out. I would never tell a child to put their mother or father out. What we will do is help you arrive because there are possibilities.
Absolutely.
And since I can't tell the future any better than anyone else can, one thing we tell our clinicians never to say, please don't promise them it's going to be okay.
No,
Because I
you
can't
can't.
tell the future.
Right.
And that's a really disempowering thing for a professional to be in.
I, always share with families my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite line, or that I use, is you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror tomorrow morning. So do what you need to do to make yourself okay.
I've heard you say that, Linda.
Yeah,
I
I-
remember being moved when you said it to her mother. Because, and that's a situation, obviously, no therapist should be superimposed in. And God forbid it was my immediate family. You know, I would listen to those around me and hopefully arrive at my own decision. So,
You always have to live with yourself. So if it's going against your grain for whatever someone's telling you, you know, just be in the moment and make the best decision that you can that day.
and hopefully if some form of intervention is
Yes.
included in that.
Of course.
Everything from sending someone in 12-step programs to the house, to calling LICAD's 24-hour line, to using a host of licensed, certified
Absolutely.
interventionists, not marketers posing as interventionists, but real interventionists. We have many very reputable ones right here on Long Island. For using people who understand the disease of addiction to go over.
I want to ask you. So in an intervention, is it done? So if I call you up, you're going to come right over and
No, this takes
it takes some time to put together.
preparation. Like I
Yeah.
said, this is equally for the family. So we can't go into an intervention until all of everyone's emotions are processed. Remember, addiction plays out differently because of the codependency. The sister may be angry because the brother sold the Xbox. Father may be angry because he quit baseball and he had high hopes for him. Mom just wants to play peacemaker and she has empathy and support. We can't go into that having a different approach. This is why we teach about the disease of addiction,
Yes.
that this loved one is sick and you're having different reactions to his sickness, which you're all entitled to. But we need to be unified.
Yes.
You have a right to be angry. You have a right to be sad or concerned. And you have a right to be resentful that he stole your Xbox. I'm not telling you how to feel. But for the purpose of getting your loved one to treatment, let's be unified in understanding that this individual is sick. And then we can come at him with an empathetic and a compassionate heart and say, we love you.
Yes.
Here are our boundaries. Here's our opportunity of what we're going to offer you in the way of treatment. And pretty please with sugar on top, because I love you, they read the letters. We have them write letters because we'd rather them come from the heart, but some people get startled in a situation.
You do get startled, and I think if you have the opportunity to put down really what you want to say into words, it's going to it's come from your heart.
And
you
this
know?
is called family process. And they didn't get sick overnight, and intervention shouldn't be done overnight. Believe me, there's ways this goes wrong.
Yeah.
If someone's anger converts to this anger and the user goes on the defensive immediately, of course they're going on the defensive. They think that the family and the interventionist is trying to take their drugs away from them. To the user, the drugs are not the problem. They're the solution.
Correct.
They're how I deal with my primary emotions of mad, glad, scared, and sad. Without them, I'd be naked in front of the world with my emotional spectrum. And since they probably started that in some early or mid-adolescence, and depending on where they are, it's all they've known in their young adult life on how to deal or cope with emotions. So believe me, they're holding on for dear life. And that level of denial becomes even more spiked if there's the sense of that this is
Against them
Yes.
and not for them.
And that takes training, that takes process, and it takes strategy. And a good interventionist understands all that. Because a family is as complex as the world.
Absolutely, and each family is different, so not one approach is going to make sense for everyone.
And not uncommon. You know, we're talking about my problem. You drink 12 beers a day, Dad.
Right.
But that needs to be sorted out before. Because
Absolutely.
if that is true, the dad's not the one failing out of school or failing out of work. So, you know, we have to tread very lightly, and no one's on trial.
Right.
So that's really important. Unfortunately, you have some marketers posing as interventionists that want to go in there gangbuster and
Charge an exorbitant fee.
with a gunny sack and a rope, transport them out of state, only for the family to get a bill for tens of thousands of dollars, and only for the treatment not to be effective.
And only for the family not to be involved. So have we failed the family because their loved one can't come back to dysfunction.
And that's another seismic shift that we've seen here, and I think Thomas's Hope is a leader in that. Thank God we're involved in the family.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say LICAD was pioneers, but I haven't been there for 61 years. I've been there for 10, but for 61 years we've mirrored every service for the family because we knew it was a family disease.
Oasis, I worked with them last week and spoke to all their ACP directors about the importance of bringing the family back. If someone had said to me, Linda, we need you to come in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You're going to be learning about Thomas's disease and he needs the support of his family. You know, can we count on you? Yes. What else do you need me to do? Or if someone said that to me and the family's answer is, that's not my problem, that's his problem. Don't we have a clear path for after treatment? Where is the patient going to go?
That's right.
Are they going to go home to a supportive family? No. Are they going home to a family that's been educated? Yes.
And sometimes the dysfunction's in the family unit too.
Without a doubt.
That you got mom and dad saying,
Without-
I'm so glad you're off heroin. Grab a beer, son, and let's watch the game.
Yeah.
So
I know.
education is needed.
Education is needed.
And let's
at
face
every
it, we're the
step.
parents. And,
Yes.
And if you grew up in the 60s, 70s, or 80s and you smoked a little weed or you drank a little of this, it's a different time and age, different drugs, different kids.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Steve.
you, Linda. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you next week. Peter Schweisgood Breakfast. Please donate to LICAT if you can, and have a very blessed weekend.